Please introduce yourself.
I'm Clayton Campbell. I'm a visual artist living in Los Angeles, California. I've been here since 1990. I grew up in New York City. I studied at the Art Students League, and then in 1969, during the Vietnam War, I left the country and went to Austria, where I studied with the artist Ernst Fuchs. I have been back in the United States since 1975. I've lived in Colorado, Santa Fe, New York, but I've really been based in Los Angeles for the last 22 years. During that time, besides pursuing my practice, which has been ongoing since I was 18, I was the director of the 18th Street Arts Center, where I'm currently located and where the studio is from 1995 to 2010. And during that time, I curated and organized over 50 exhibitions and 400 residencies with artists from 25 countries. So I have a very long history in arts administration, arts writing, but also as a practicing artist, which is my main occupation and which gives everything else its logic.
Has it been difficult breaking into the art world?
Not when I was breaking in. It was much smaller. I was in New York City. There was a community. You could meet people. I knew Robert Mapplethorpe. I knew Basquiat. I knew Keith Haring. Not intimately, but we all went to the same clubs. I mean, you could find people. The gallery world there, since I'm a visual artist and I show in museums and galleries, it seemed easier to break into. Today, I think it would be very difficult, and I would not want to be a young artist trying to break into the art world today. It's changed completely. And all I can say is there are tens of thousands of talented artists out there, and there are very few slots for them. So I think it's quite tough to break in. What you need to do is set up your own organization, your own way of getting your work out there, and not wait around for permission from any gallery or any curator, but really set up your own way of distributing your work and just take charge of your own career.
Can you tell me about your piece, Words My Son Has Learned Since 9/11, that's in the permanent collection of the Library of Congress print and drawing collection?
In 2004, I made a photographic installation called Words My Son Has Learned Since 9/11. It really started just as something I was doing privately with my son, who was 11 at that time. He and all his friends were expressing so much anxiety about the future. And it wasn't only 9/11, it was the entire milieu of the Bush administration, nuclear weapons in Pakistan and India. They were absorbing all this stuff through the news. So I asked my son to write down words he'd learned since 9/11. And he did. And I photographed him holding those words, which he had written on a piece of paper. And when I looked at them, I realized it was an incredible artwork. There were 50 images that were hung in a grid. They were shown to the Photo Museum in Paris, the Maison de la Photographie de l'Européenne, and they immediately put it on exhibit. It was quite extraordinary. Since then, what's happened, it was shown at the LA County Museum, and I began to invite visitors to the exhibit to have their portraits taken with words that they'd identified, either that they had learned since 9/11 or words they'd known that had taken on a new meaning. And this is one of my projects that's really hit the zeitgeist, and it's been at maybe 15 different institutions in Tehran, in Kurdistan, in Northern Ireland, in London, in Gdansk, Poland, in Warsaw, in Ansan, Korea. It's going to Beijing this fall, it's going to Bucharest in June, and at each stop I photograph people who come to the exhibit or young people who are invited, and their portraits immediately enter into the exhibition. It's in numerous collections, and all I can say is that the future of this project it's going to be loaded up on a new software program that's going to be a site where people can come and add their own imagery to this project, where people can co-author this in other cities or countries where I can't get to expand the conversation. So sort of make it short, I've never had a project that's taken off like this and become this popular and is ongoing. I would call it a socially responsible artwork. It's participatory. It's not partisan in asking people just to identify words as opposed to express an opinion. It's created this amazing cross-cultural conversation. I'm very proud of it. And yeah, so I will be in Romania with it this June and then in Beijing with the project in October.
What drew you to making photographic installations?
I was trained as a painter. I was trained to paint in layers. This is the essence of Photoshop. I always worked with cameras, integrating cameras and into painting. I was one of the early Xerox artists. I was doing a lot of experimenting with Xerox, kind of photo composites that could be made with Xerox. And so when Photoshop arrived and digital cameras arrived, it was a natural for me to work with them. I concluded my painting in about 2005 with a major exhibition, and at that point I moved totally into digital productions. It fits my time frame. I work very quickly, and painting no longer allowed me to I couldn't keep up with the ideas and that technique. I generate an awful lot of work and an awful lot of imagery. It's easier to store on a hard drive. Photoshop is the same kind of painting principles I started with. Anyway, it really fits my predilection to work quickly and generate a large amount of material.
In 1976, you founded the Performing Space in Santa Fe. How did this come about?
I was partners with a woman named Anne Schofield, who was one of the first feminist theater directors, extremely talented one. We moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we founded a place called the Performing Space. It was a black box theater that did experimental autobiographical performance art, and then there was a gallery where we showed contemporary work that was more transgressive. This was my first experience in organizing a not-for-profit organization that other artists could work in. So a very big part of my practice as an artist has been to be what I call a cultural producer and really support other artists in their projects. So my first experience was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was quite successful, and then we handed it off to other people to run it, and at that point I moved back to New York with Anne, who did work there, and I was involved in the gallery world at that time in New York, and also establishing an art center on Bond Street called the Campo Cultural Center. So from the Performing Space, I developed really a career working in arts administration, primarily as a program specialist to help other artists realize their projects.
Do you prefer any one medium to another? Is there a medium that you'd enjoy working in more than any other?
Well, you know, I am really good at pencil drawing, and I haven't had any time to do it. My pencil drawings used to take 3 to 5 months to finish, and I don't have the time to do that. If I could, I would do some more pencil drawing. I love the quality of just pencil on paper, and my work is extremely detailed, if not baroque in its sensibility. The medium I like the most is the one I'm working with right now. Is photographic imagery, which is processed through Photoshop. But I appreciate other mediums. I have no idea how to work with it, but I really appreciate a good glass maker and can spend hours looking at glass. So that's, for me it's photography, but I have a deep appreciation for pencil drawing and for glass making.
How do you approach a project? Do you work very methodically, or is it spur of the moment?
That's a good question, because both things can happen in a process. In a work like this one that I'm pointing at, you can see all of these bands. That is a corrupted photograph. I intentionally corrupted the digital file, so when I reopened it, it would break apart into these bands. that's very spontaneous. You don't know what's going to happen, and from there, I might really improvise with the image, the background image, layering on other images. Just, you know, often I put on music, and the music determines what happens with the imagery. Other images like this one are more structured. I have an established background. I kind of have a narrative I want to work with, and so it's a little more deliberate. All of my work allows things to happen, but some are simply more spontaneous and improvisational than others where I want to develop a very clear narrative.
You're also a prominent arts writer, as you were the Los Angeles editor of Contemporary magazine and the Los Angeles correspondent for Flash Art International magazine. Why did becoming an observer and critic appeal to you?
When I write, I'm not a judgmental writer, so when I write critiques of other artists' work, I really try to look at their ideas, examine them, and make those ideas accessible to a broader public. I try to stay away from criticizing other artists. I don't mind being critical in something that would allow people to understand the work and also might help the artist. But I never write reviews that slam artists. If I don't like work, I just don't write about it. I'm more of a, really more writing critical theory and essays about ideas. For me, it's part of an artist's practice to do this, to think about, think deeply about why we make art, how it's made, the formality of it, the criticality of it. But personally, I like to write in a way that has a more kind of popular vernacular, so we bring art to a much larger audience. I don't write in the way you might find in some of the art journals where it's really for that small audience of MFA students who would only understand that language. And that's why I like Flash Art. You can write more broadly, or a contemporary magazine. But I'm not writing as a reviewer or as a critic. I'm really writing as a cultural commentator, and so I've really enjoyed doing that as part of my practice. I like writing, in particular, interviewing artists. Like I've done this with Bill Viola or Frank Gehry or Vanessa Beecroft, and really teasing out their ideas so a broader public can go, oh, that's why Vanessa has all these naked people standing around, or this is why Frank's buildings look like they're curved and could fall down, or this is why Bill Viola does these sort of symbolist pieces. I'm really about ideas and finding out what other artists are thinking, putting it into text, and putting it into a language that is broadly accessible yet still is really speaking to the art.
Do you use art as an outlet, a way to express yourself?
Yeah, well, it's the only way I know myself. If I wasn't making art, none of these other things we're talking about would have much logic. I wouldn't be writing. I wouldn't be running art centers. It's the making of art and the process where I, just in a more ephemeral way, really understand who I am and what my place in the world is. It, in some ways, gives me an identity, it's true, but it also shapes my identity. It tells me who I am as a person. It establishes the values that I live by. It's an instinctual process that opens me up to a kind of more holistic approach to being in the world. So this is how I know myself. It's been like this since I was 5 years old when I started drawing in kindergarten. It was the only way I could actually express myself and know who I was. So it's quite important. It's central to me. I'm an artist.
If you weren't an artist, what do you think you would be doing right now?
I've heard other artists answer this, and they go, oh, I'd be a criminal, or I'd be this, or I'd be that. I have a feeling I'd just probably be working in a bank, or doing something, and there's nothing wrong with that, doing just something that was repetitive, where I wasn't thinking about myself. wasn't involved in a lot of self-examination. I can tell you other jobs I've had during my life. I was a great cook in restaurants. I mean, I suppose that's creative, but I would never have thought of myself as an artist. The thing is, I can't imagine myself being anything else. I have stayed committed to this path since the day I said to myself when I think I was 17, like, oh my God, I'm an artist. And then I set about discovering what that meant, and I have not wavered. I've never compromised in my work, whether it sells or not, or whether people like it or not. Again, it's how I know myself. There's no other way I can be. Hard to imagine being something else, but it probably would be something pretty banal. It wouldn't be romantic, like I'd be a criminal or I'd be subversive or transgressive. I know a lot of artists who think of themselves that way, but I think of the arts and artists as something that is central to the meaning of our social existence, where artists bring the best answers, besides asking the best questions. So we are right in the center of the social fabric and the social compact we have. We are not outside of it. We are not on the margins. And I reject any kind of identity that may be placed on me that wants to put me out on the margins where I can be seen as ineffective.
What are you influenced by? Do you draw from personal experience or external influences?
I'm influenced, I mean, both ways. It was like an earlier question about do you work more freely or more planned? With the words piece, I'm completely, that's an external kind of influence. The people are responding to questions about the socio-political world they live in. So I've done a lot of work that refers to that. I did a great piece called Refereeing Evander Holyfield. And I refereed the world champion Evander Holyfield in a boxing match. And the photographs of that were used as the premise for mediation of conflict, and that exhibit toured Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles. So it was a metaphor for what was happening there. So there's that side. Another side of my work is intensely personal, like the work I'm making right now. I'm in it. I'm referring to what's happening to me, both socially, but also in a very deep emotional space. I'm presenting them as narrative pictures, but these are all coming from my memories, from my very personal observations, especially from my feelings about myself, about my relationship to other people, about where I am at this point in my life. It's a vulnerable place to be, putting work out there that's personal, but I think creativity takes courage, and you have to have it to be in this field.
Do you have a favorite piece of work that you've made so far?
There's a drawing that I have that I gave to my son. It's a large pencil drawing. It's the last one I ever made. The reason it's my favorite is that it was sort of signaled the end of my student years. I did a piece that was so stupendous, I realized I could stop doing work that way and really move on. It was sold numerous times, and finally it came up for sale again, and I bought it back and gave it to my son, who loves it. And so that's my favorite piece. It's called, oh my God, what's it called? It's called The Bourgeois Ecstasy Hunters. And it's a slap at the middle class, but as a drawing, it's extremely elegant and complicated, and a real tour de force. People don't draw that way anymore, including me. It's very difficult to do it. So that's my favorite piece.
Are you inspired by anyone in particular, or role model perhaps?
Well, my role models were I mean, I had mentors as I was growing up. Certainly Ernst Fuchs, who I studied with, a Japanese calligrapher named Kampo Harada, who was a extraordinary individual in Japan. But when I look around at the art world, some of my friends are models. Suzanne Lacey, who's a public practitioner, is great. Daniel Martinez, I'm inspired by. He's a local artist. I love James Rosenquist's paintings. He's not my contemporary, but his famous painting F-111 has always meant a great deal to me. And I think Judy Chicago's Dinner Party is one of the greatest artworks made in the 20th century. And Judy, who I know, inspires me. So, you know, I see these artists who are alive, who are maintaining their practice, and really with great perseverance and dignity, upholding the idea that we can be artists and that we are artists. I respond to those people. And I'm proud that they're my colleagues. They're fantastic people. So I would look to them. And I think it's significant that two of my models are women. You know, women were shut out of the art world for a really long time. It's still not easy, but it's a hell of a lot easier than it was. So, you know, I think it's significant that I have learned a lot from women.
What is your greatest ambition as an artist?
My greatest ambition is to share my work after I've made something that's really worth sharing. It's not about getting into a gallery and the commerce of it. In fact, I have really serious questions about whether the gallery system is killing creativity as opposed to advancing it. But I show primarily in museums and art centers that are public spaces. And my ambition is just to have my work in as many places as possible, just because I think the responsibility is to get it out there for people to see it and engage in the conversations I'm asking them to be part of. So as long as I'm going to live, I'm going to keep doing that. But again, the first thing is make work that's worth seeing, make work that people can actually bring themselves into and have an experience with, and then find ways to really ambitiously get the work out there. So you're really sharing it. Art's a gift. It's been a gift for me to be able to make it. I've got to extend the gift by giving it back and letting people really see it. In my case, you know, I'm making objects or two-dimensional works, maybe projections, videos. There are different ways people can experience this, and I'm exploring the delivery systems. If I have a personal ambition, it's to be known as an artist who was really serious and lived a life that was a serious one, that took art seriously and advanced the entire notion of what being an artist meant, and that the arts was important to culture, not only in the United States, but internationally.
What's next?
What's next is a couple of things. And I mentioned I have an exhibit of the Words Project at the International Center of Contemporary Art in Bucharest in June. I have work, the new work, which is called Interloping, Belonging or Not Belonging, at the Unit 24 Gallery in June. And then the Words Project is going to the Three Shadows Photography Art Center that Ai Weiwei designed on October 13th. It opens in Beijing. And then I go to some conferences because, I haven't mentioned this, but the way I make my living right now, and will continue to, is that I'm a consultant to major arts foundations in the United States. I consult on their programming. I help them design them. I'm very skilled in this area, so my time is split between the consulting and the making of the work and the exhibits. So what's next in the consulting, which is interesting, is I'm working with the Cleveland Foundation to help them redesign their Visiting International Artists program, which is quite exciting. I'm working with the Rockefeller Foundation, helping them with their Bellagio Visiting Artist program in Italy. I'm working with the Rasmussen Foundation in Alaska, for artists to go to Alaska for residencies and Alaska artists to come to the lower 48. So I'm continuing to do this work of helping other artists realize their projects or move about. I'm writing a number of papers on arts and culture, in particular how artist residency programs and even museum programs need to reimagine themselves if they're going to survive as anything relevant and viable. That will probably be presented at some foundation conference where it'll be received with some degree of criticism. But I'm writing about things that I feel are coming, that I believe in. So that's what's coming next. In terms of my own work, I'm working with these interesting photo composites, and I'm developing a delivery system in which let's say I take a portfolio of 12 images. They're going to be put in a special monitor. The images will be embedded in the monitor. That's all you'll see. And they'll be in a slideshow where the images are up for maybe an hour or two and then slowly change. So it will be like a painting or a print, but there will be a portfolio. And they're meant to be permanently on the wall. And as you pass through, let's say, your home in the course of the day, the images are gradually changing. They'll never be the same thing. So I'm working with some curators on that and with some technicians and computer people how to design it. That's what's next. So it's quite a bit, and I'm excited and optimistic about what I'm doing.
Any words of advice for other aspiring artists?
Yeah,
or young artists?
Be authentic. If you're aspiring, understand perhaps that 20% of your time you'll do what you really want to do, and the other 80% you're going to have to do other things to support that 20%, whether it's side jobs or other stuff, but don't get discouraged. I think the important thing is don't play to what you think someone else wants you to do. Do what you want to do. Make sure you know what kind of work you want to do, and then just fiercely go after it. Do not compromise. There's no, we don't live long enough to be compromising all the time. If you're a true artist, you've been given the gift of autonomy to make the work you want to make, and just be courageous and stick to it. Everything else will follow if you're doing what you want to do.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.